Hey everybody, good evening. Welcome to Live Wax with Christian McBride here on the Newport Jazz Festival Instagram page. I'm happy to see you all. Well, I'm happy you can see me because I can't see you. But glad you're here to join me. My mother always taught me not to wear hats inside, but I have not shaved my head in a couple of days. And so I'm looking really bad, and I don't want anybody to see that. James Brown would not be proud of me. Like, son, I told you about that. You got the world looking at you. You got to groom yourself, son. So in honor of Mr. Brown, I'm keeping my hat on. As you will notice, oftentimes when I wear my hats, you might not recognize these teams that I'm wearing. I'm a big fan of not just MLB, but I follow Japanese baseball as well. So I've worn a lot of hats from Japanese baseball. And this here are the Seibu Lions. And they play just outside of Tokyo. And anytime I'm in Japan, actually anytime I travel, I go try to see sporting events. I love sports. I'm not digging sports. Sorry about that. Somebody from New Orleans just called and interrupted this. But anyhow, I just saw the 504 and I clicked decline. But yeah, I'm not happy right now in sports because all my Philly teams are, Sixers, done. Thank you, Celtics. I've never liked you. Nor will I ever. I respect you, but I don't like you. My Flyers on the brink. The New York Islanders got their foot, have their skate in the Flyers' neck. So I know game 5 is tomorrow, and it's do or die for the Flyers. So yeah, I'm Phillies, so, but the music always keeps you happy. You know what I mean? In times like these, listen to a lot of music, write a lot of music, immerse yourself in the art form. That'll always give you some optimism, some positivity, some happiness, something to look forward to, Yeah, so, there's my man Sheriff. What's tonight, Sheriff? The Flyers and Islanders? Yeah, I guess in my head I don't really want to. I'm worried, But anyhow, back to the music. My guest tonight, Miss Grace Kelly. You know what I really dig about her? When I first met her, which seems like it wasn't that long ago, but now that I think about it, it must have been quite some time ago. I don't even think she was a teenager yet. I'm thinking she might have been like 12, maybe. I don't know. I could be wrong. But one thing I've always really dug about Grace is that she has a real bond with her elders. And as a jazz artist, that to me is so supremely important. As a bass player, when I started getting into this music and I moved to New York City 31 years ago, seek out Ron Carter. Seek out Bob Cranshaw. Seek out Rufus Reed, Ray Drummond, David Williams, all the cats that were working around New York City. Ron McClure. Go find them. Spend time with them. Find out what you need to know. You know what I mean? And I've always respected Grace because I've seen her with Phil Woods, Lee Konitz, and she's always had that bond. And also, I'm going to wait till I bring her on, but there's another person who we shared a bond with, who was a very, very great guy, and I miss him a lot. And that's Mr. Fred Taylor, who used to book Scullers in Boston, and he was a fixture in Boston for many, many years. And needless to say, the godfather of Newport himself, George Wein. So she's always surrounded herself with the elders, trying to learn something But at the same time, she is very much speaking with contemporary language. And so, without further ado, I'm going to see if my friend is here. There she is. Drum for Grace Kelly. Here she comes.
Hey!
What's up?
What's up, Christian? What a pleasure.
Oh, thanks for being my guest.
It's like surreal. I'm so excited and honored. And I gotta say that this series is like a treasure chest on Newport Jazz's page. I mean, I've spent like the last few, like an hour just today, and I'm like, I gotta just come back to this because all the interviews, I was watching Terry Lynn Carrington's and
Right.
so many great ones. So I'm just delighted to be on. Thanks
Oh,
for
well,
having
thank
me.
you very much. Thank you. You know, long before I was offered the position of artistic director of Newport, I heard George Wein say many times, he was like, I love Grace. She's part of the Newport family. We raised her.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
So I know that George has a very, you think of the history of the Newport Jazz Festival, especially since it moved back to Newport in the early 80s. I can think of a couple of people who really are fixtures and people who George he has a real affinity for. And you were one of those people. You know, I heard he talks about you, he talks about Anat Cohen, Michelle Camilo, of course, has been a fixture at Newport for many years. But I don't know if you heard me mention Fred Taylor.
I did, and my
You
heart
know,
lit up.
Fred was, as you well know, he was my man, and he also loved you to death. And I'd like to start this conversation off. If you could say a few words about Fred Taylor, what he meant to you, what he meant to Boston,
Oh my
and
gosh!
just what a great guy he was.
Yes, well, it really comes full circle when talking about Newport Jazz and meeting George Wein for the first time because Fred Taylor was the one who opened so many doors for me in my career. He was the one who introduced me to, or maybe told George Wein about me. Initially, he's like family to
Yeah.
me, and it's honestly just so, it's weird that he's no longer with us.
Yeah.
But I first met Fred when I was, I think, like 12 years old. I mean, I grew up in Boston, so I would often go to Scullers Jazz Club, which, speaking of Scullers, the album Super Bass, your record is like, I love seeing on the album cover too. It's like that legendary Scullers sign. I
Oh
mean, there's just
yeah.
been so much amazing music that's come out of that club, and what Fred Taylor did as a producer and a promoter, and the people he brought into Scullers. I met Marion McPartland there. I met David Sambord there. I sat in with Tooth Thielman and Kenny Warner, and and then before my time, everything he created with Paul's Mall and Jazz
Right.
Workshop, which I've
That's
heard
right.
so many stories of him talking about, his days with Diana Ross and Miles Davis and how they had these great jokes. And so there's pictures of me that I'm like 6 years old and I'm at Scullers Jazz Club in my dad's arms just asleep. And because they were taking me from a really young age before I was playing sax, before I was in jazz. And I think at one point we kept showing up at Scullers, and he definitely kind of knew my face, and but it wasn't until he heard me play. I was sitting in with Ann Hampton Calloway.
Uh-huh.
Love
I
her.
love Ann Hampton
Love
Calloway. That's
her.
my girl.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I was playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow with her, and afterwards Fred came up to me and he said, "We got to get you in here with your band." And I nearly like fainted. I mean, I was like 12, and to go in and play my first jazz club gig at like this legendary venue, that was the beginning. And literally from then on, he's family. I mean, over at Thanksgiving, my mom's cooking for everyone. He's doing his napkin trick. I literally went into some music conferences with him. Like
Yeah.
he introduced me to my first agent, and I'm really, really happy that that there's now an endowed scholarship in his name at the Berklee College of Music that
Oh, nice.
that myself and my family started, and it was his wish. He said, you know, I don't have any kids, and the most amazing thing would be to potentially have like a scholarship in his name to remember him, his legacy. And we said, Fred, we're gonna make it happen.
Done. Yeah.
Gonna happen.
Yeah.
And we had a really amazing concert to kick off the endowed scholarship, where we raised like $70,000 for all the fans who came.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, it was beautiful. And he was crying, you know, it was so special.
Yeah, yeah. Do me a favor and say hello to your parents. Your parents are so cool. I saw them. I believe I saw them at the festival last year.
Yeah.
And they're just really just super nice people.
Well,
and
they're watching.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, hello there. How you doing, guys? You know, Grace, I want to tell you about a project that you were involved in. You know, I don't know how I discovered Leo P.
Oh yeah, my dude.
I saw him. I think I saw him. I don't know how I stumbled across it, but he was playing with some orchestra in London,
Oh,
and
yes.
I saw this cat dancing and moving and dancing. I was like, I'd never seen that before with a baritone saxophone,
Yeah.
and like I found myself like I couldn't stop watching. I like went down a rabbit hole of like Leo P YouTube videos, right? And then I discovered Too Saxy.
Just to hear that come out of your mouth.
How did you two hook up?
How did we link up? So I had a very similar reaction when I first saw one of Leo's, like years ago. He had a video that went super viral of him in the New York City subways.
Right.
And
yeah, I saw
like,
those after
yeah.
the London video, right.
Yeah, and I remember being like, I have never seen anyone with this performance, dancing, playing these crazy sounds, like making up this style. And I remember just reposting it, being like, wow. And then like, you know, fast forward years, we just started talking on Instagram, and we had a lot of mutual friends, and we're like, hey, yeah, like, you like love what you're doing, let's meet one day. But it was like 6 months until we finally got to meet. He was living in Philly and I was in New York, and at some point we were like, all right, let's just like rent a rehearsal studio.
He's a Philly dude?
What's that? Yeah, he's in Philly.
Ah,
yeah.
Now I know why I like him.
Yeah. And when the first time we met up, first of all, we just clicked so much as like people. And then we were like, started jamming, and we kind of started dancing together, and we're like, wow, these moves look really, really cool when we do them side by side, you know, synchronized. And we're just like having fun, being like, all right, like if you go that way and I go this way, you play that bass line, I play this. And so then we were like, let's record a really short video. We recorded it, put it up. Our fans like freaked out. They were just like, what?
Yeah.
So yes. And then, you know, over the years, we've done a lot of just collaborations, video collabs, and worked on new material. And then last year, we're like, well, let's make it official. Let's, you know, and as we were doing some pop-up outside, he was like, we're too saxy. And I'm like, I think that's what let's call it that. So, you know, we've been doing a lot of online teaching these days. And yeah, every time we come together and we collaborate and we make content, it's so much fun. I really love working with him because he really approaches the saxophone in such a different way, in such a different style. And we come from very different musical places, you know, although some of it really aligns. And I think we have a similar spiritual feeling when it comes to making music. So we've been having a blast. Yeah. But it's
now tell me about that, because you're born and raised in Boston. Your folks took you to hear this music when you were very, very young. So how old were you when you started playing the saxophone?
I was 10 years old when I started the sax. Before that, I played my first introduction to music. Well, I guess my first introduction was singing, because as soon as I could talk, I was told that I was singing. And I was playing classical piano at the age of 6. And I was really into Broadway music and theater from that age. And I actually didn't know that much jazz. My parents played Stan Getz on repeat, and Girl from Ipanema was just like the Sunday brunch song. And it wasn't until I started studying with my first sax teacher that he was like, all right, we're going to check out Johnny Hodges, Charlie Parker, Coltrane, Cannonball. My brain was like, oh my God. Okay, this is it. Phil Woods, Lee Konitz. But the thing I knew from listening to Stan Getz from, being 6, 7 years old is I thought the saxophone sounded like the human voice. It hit me so, it hit my heart. And the way Stan Getz would play, it was so lyrical that I would sing along with all his phrases. And, and then so I really tucked it away. I was like, in my head, I was like, one day I really want to play sax. And I remember when that day finally came, because before sax, I was playing clarinet and I was wrestling with it. It was squeaking on me. It was just so rough, like so rough. But when I finally played the sax and I played one note and it was like, this is finally, this is it. This is what I've been, like, this is the sound here. Finally, it's here.
Now, but hearing Stan Getz, I mean, obviously he played tenor. He didn't play alto. You, alto was your first saxophone you played, right?
Yes.
Why alto and not tenor?
So I think in general, I just like listened to more tenor players, and I did from the beginning. But I think it was just my teacher was like, you should start on alto. I think as far as just tuning wise, getting used to the instrument, that was his recommendation. What I love about playing alto, and the reason I haven't switched, is I think it's the same range as my voice. And so I really hear the pitches in my head when I sing. It connects. When I play tenor, it doesn't quite do that.
Yeah, like an octave up.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, when I play baritone, I still feel connected, but definitely the most connected from playing the alto. But my goal kind of when I play is to make it sound more like a tenor. Because I love so many. Yeah, I love the range of the tenor.
I have bad memories of the alto saxophone because when I first started playing the acoustic bass in middle school, our orchestra was overrun by alto players. We had like 10 alto saxophone players in our band.
Oh my God.
And then when I get to high school, we had like 8 alto players in the big band.
Oh,
so I was just like I would go to sleep seeing an alto saxophone. I'd be like, ah.
This is the nightmare of the high C sharp, just so out of tune.
Yeah, we had 8 alto saxophones, 1 tenor, and 1 bari.
Wow, that is wild. Oh my gosh.
Like, where are the tenors? But I don't have that dream anymore. I'm very cool with the alto now. I have no problem with the alto saxophone. But
oh God, that's funny. That's really
I feel like that. I feel like at some point, I guess particularly around that time when I was in middle school and particularly in high school, there was like a whole wave of alto players that completely just, like Kenny Garrett, Greg Osby, Steve Coleman, Donald Harrison, like all these alto players started coming out of nowhere and they all were killing.
Yeah.
And 2 cats I grew up with in Philly, Robert Landon and Lewis Taylor. And like alto became like, and then I come to New York and I meet Steve Wilson, and then people like yourself and Tia Fuller and Jaleel Shaw here trying to be incognito. But, it's like all these killing alto players out here. I love it.
Me too. What's up, Jaleel? That's so cool. He's tuned in. Yeah. I remember the first time I heard Kenny Garrett sound and his recording, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know that alto could sound like that. There's been there's been so many places that the modern alto sax has been going sound wise. And Steve Wilson was a past teacher of mine for a very short period, and God,
Privately or at school?
it was at the Brubeck Colony. It was just at I think it was like a week that I could spend at the Brubeck Jazz Colony
I
program.
remember that. I remember talking to Steve right before he went out there.
It was amazing because just his sense of sound and the way that he would teach it,
Yeah.
is something that I still hold on to this today. You know, super.
Well, Steve, you know Steve is my man. He's played in pretty much every band I've had in the last decade plus.
He is, yeah.
Now, I want to ask you about how you connected with Phil Woods.
Oh, yeah. So, Phil Woods has been a huge inspiration to me since, I started alto. And it was at the Stanford Jazz Residency, which is a great program in Stanford, California, that I think it was my parents, or it was somebody, it was a friend of mine who's a sound engineer. He said, Phil Woods is actually teaching at Stanford for the week at the residency. And he's like, I know how much of a fan Grace is, and boy, wouldn't it be amazing if she could, go do that program. And so I was so fortunate to be able to actually go to the program. And I remember, actually, I went on Phil Wood's website, and there's a place that you can email him. And I wrote him an email, and I told him how much of an impact he's made in my musical life. And I asked if there was any chance that I could get a lesson with him while there. And he wrote back being like, I don't give private lessons, or something like there won't be enough time, but I look forward to seeing you. And I think he had heard about me from Lee Conant's, and I showed up there, and as fate would have it, I ended up being in an ensemble right before the ensemble that he taught.
Yeah.
And I think Kenny Barron was leading my ensemble. I mean, it was the year I went a few years, so I think Kenny Barron was my that was awesome, my teacher. And so Phil Woods used to actually come early, and he'd listen in, and he was just so encouraging, and just said, in our few minutes of passing, would just, say really encouraging things. And after Stanford, I got to see him in Massachusetts, in Pittsfield, Mass, and he was playing, and I went to say hi to him before, and he said, do you have your axe with you? And I happened to have it, and he said, why don't you come on up and play?
That's how it happens.
Oh my God. It was just this really surreal moment where we played I'll Remember April, and after my solo, he took off the legendary cap that he's worn on so many, of his album covers, and really well worn. He put it on my head, and I tried to give it back, and he said, no, you keep that. That's for you. And that was the beginning. And later, we got to record an album together, play Newport, Jazz Fest, play the Hollywood Bowl, Playboy Jazz Festival. Literally, we actually did a tour in Europe, which is still blows my mind.
I remember.
Yeah, it blows my mind that we were together, like riding in a van. My dad was driving, and we'd stop for schnitzel, and he'd tell me stories about Benny Carter and Charlie Parker, and
You know what I have that I desperately need to hurry up and digitize? I was on the road with Phil in the early 90s with the Philip Morris Super Band. And at that time, I remember thinking, like, Donald Byrd was in the band, Phil Woods, Jimmy Heath, Slide Hampton, Kenny Barron was there, Bob Cranshaw, Kenny. It was the first year they had combos instead of the big band. And so they had like the Legends combo, and then they had the Up and Coming combo, which I was in. And so I remember saying, I better take my tape recorder because I want to document as much of this as I can. So I have an hour-long interview I did with Phil on that tour. I have it on a cassette back here somewhere, but I need to desperately get that digitized. And it was moving. It was moving. He got into some stuff where we both were tearing up because, he loves the music and the people that made this music so much. He started telling stories about Bird and start telling me stories about Gene Quill,
Yeah.
and I mean he got welled up with emotion, so I got that on tape.
Oh, I, that's gold.
Now I got one last Phil Wood story. Well, it's actually not. Well, it's sort of a Phil Wood story. So, somebody who Phil was very close with, who he recorded with a bunch, was the late great Grady Tate.
Yeah.
And so Grady was telling me a story about they had done an Oliver Nelson recording, one of many Oliver Nelson records they played on together. And Grady said this one particular session, they were laying down tracks for a vocalist. So the music was pretty simple, It's like a lot of a lot of whole notes, a lot of half notes, a lot of ballads, And Grady said they had a break. When it came time for the break, Oliver Nelson was still in the corner working on another chart. He assumed it was going to be a similar chart. And somebody in the band said, "Hey, I got some weed. Let's go up to the roof." So they go up to the roof of the studio, and I guess apparently this weed that they smoked was high octane, shall we say, right? And so Grady said the whole band came back down, and like everybody was lit. They were just like, oh damn, yeah, let's knock this out so we can go home. And so Grady said Oliver passed the music out, and it was like patterns for orchestra, like one of those hard pieces that he wrote, like some sort of something crazy like that. Grady said he knew it was serious because, and this is where the Phil Woods reference comes in. He said no matter how hard the music was, Phil Woods would always have one leg crossed, and he'd be sight reading it like nothing. Like, the hardest music in the world, he said Phil Woods just be sight reading like, challenge please, And he said when they came back after smoking that weed, he said he looked down and Phil had uncrossed his legs and got up in the music like this, like, oh shit, what, I can't, oh man. And he said when he saw Phil do that, he was like, oh, we're screwed.
Oh my God. Oh, that is hysterical.
He said Oliver Nelson got so mad, he's like, look, just go home. We'll do this tomorrow. Just go. Session's over.
Oh my God, that's gold.
I didn't know that story when I was on that tour with Phil, but man, that's like, he used Phil as like, if I see him uncross his legs, that means something's wrong. That means this piece really is hard.
Oh God, that's so good. I have to say, and I don't know if you feel similarly, but I really felt like Phil was such an amazing storyteller. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Just laid it all out. I remember every time he would tell stories, whether it's about, Charlie Parker trying his horn and wearing his neck strap, he just was such a good storyteller.
Yeah, oh, totally. Now, I'd like to ask you about your relationship with another dearly departed great, Lee Konitz.
Yes. Yeah, it's been tough it was really tough to see that he passed, especially with it being COVID related. And,
yes. Yeah.
He was such a, how do I even say, he taught me so much stuff and was such a special part. We had a really amazing relationship, and I feel very, very fortunate to have spent so much time with him. I first met Lee when I think I was 13, definitely in my early teens. And I remember first hearing Tristano's music and him and Warren Marsh and just like listening to that track, wow. And I remember afterwards being like, wow. Really, I was like, I've never heard anything like this. This is really interesting. I don't understand it, but I was just needed to hear more. So I, was, again, huge influence on me. This is before we met. And when we first met, I guess it was a similar situation. We got in touch with him and he said, I don't teach private lessons, you know. But he did offer, when you're in New York, Grace, you know, come over and I'd love to hear you. And so I remember the first time that I was with my dad at the time, and he invited us to his apartment, and I was so nervous as I was taking the elevator up, like so nervous. And we had this amazing time. He liked to call our lessons like music conferences instead of lessons, where we just discuss things, you know.
Right.
He'd be like, play that phrase again. Why did you bend it there? Let's talk about what a bend means. You know, he's like, I think it's a little schmaltzy. It's like very interesting stuff. Just things I'd never thought about. And the way that he'd think about it and the way he'd say it.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And his personality, the more I got to know him personally, because we spent a lot of time, you know, going to dinner, going to shows, my whole family and him, he was like as spontaneous as his music, as a person.
Yes.
I just never really knew what he was going to say or how he was going to feel, or like, I remember one time we were in a car together and I started whistling and he's like, don't do that. You know, it's like, because it reminded him of something with one.
Oh, is that right?
And whistling, it wasn't meant as, you know, anything.
Right.
Yeah. But just moments like that, I was like, huh. But it kind of deepened my relationship with his music when I'd listen to his improvisations. And was so lucky to, we recorded an album together called Gracefully, and Rufus Reed and Matt Wilson and Russell Malone were on that. I think that was the first time Lee and Russell had played together.
Wow.
And it was magic. And it was really, really special to get to play with Lee and his band at Newport Jazz Festival.
Yeah, and there's a great video of that on YouTube.
Yeah, I cherish that. And I think I really learned about spontaneous improvisation from Lee. He had a whole method of, you know, from 1 to 10 and what it means to build a new melody. And we used to just play a lot of spontaneous duets together at his apartment. And I remember we were playing Alone Together once, and he just stopped me in the middle and he'd be like, I don't know where you are. You know, let's start again. And that's when I really
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm shaking inside, like I'm so nervous.
Because I'm sure you probably could have said the same thing about him.
Yeah, there's definitely moments that it was just like so vague.
Yeah.
On both ends. And so I was just concentrating so hard because it's, you know, we're both kind of swirling in and out, just two altos. And but that's where I really learned, like, wow, this is what it means to try to keep the form and the melody and improvise at the same time. And he always really tried to get me to not rely on any licks. He's like, just react to me at the moment. And come sit in, just play, improvise. And he would sometimes just start singing, you know. Just never knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. I only got to play with Lee only a couple of times, but both times were just, one was at Stanford, at the Stanford Jazz Workshop.
Really? Okay.
Back in the, I think this was like in 2000, and it was Lee and Joe Lovano together. It was just quartet, Lovano, Lee, myself, and Joe Farnsworth.
Wow.
And that was pretty hot. And and then the last time I played with Lee was like 2 years ago. He came, I was doing a gig with Renee Fleming at the Kennedy Center, and Dan Tepfer was playing piano, and Lee came and sat in.
Really?
That was so funny.
Oh, wow.
You know, Lee would have, you know, Renee's got her gown on, and Lee's got his fisherman's jacket on, and his hat.
That a recording? Wow.
I don't think so.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, he came up and did My Funny Valentine. I'm pretty sure that's what he did. And Dan had warned us that he might sing. And he did.
Gosh. Wow. I'm just trying to put it all together in my head how I would have loved to see that. That is really, did he sing? Or
he did.
Was Renee also singing?
Well, you know, they didn't do a duet per se, but they, you know, Renee sang her part, and then Lee sang his part. Oh, it was a hoot.
Doobie doobie. He had very specific syllables. Dooba 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 that.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Oh.
that was a hoot. I got some great pictures of that gig. The pictures are almost as funny as that gig was.
Oh, I can't wait to see those. That is
Um,
a really special memory.
oh yeah, it was great. But before we open up the lines and get a couple of questions from our viewers, as I mentioned before, the other thing that I really dig about you is that with all this history that you have, being with Phil, being with Lee, being mentored by Fred and George Wein, you very much speak contemporary language. And you know, for someone in your generation, and see, this is why I want to say to all you jazz what's the right word I'm looking for? You know, these sort of didactic, um, you know, um, like these jazz people who just like they love and want to defend the music so much.
Mm, mm.
Um, like when you say something like, "Oh, I love Beyonce, I love James Brown, I love Public Enemy, I mean, you know, I don't think I know any jazz musicians who like really check out Cardi B, but if you do, so what? You know what I mean? That's going to happen. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's the natural progression. Dogmatic was the word I was looking for. Like,
Oh,
you know, like a lot of dogmatic, you know, like this is jazz.
right,
You
right.
know, um, but you seem to be like so many contemporary musicians. You understand the power of the history, but you live in the moment, which I thought is what jazz is supposed to be. So tell me, like I want to know like who some of your favorite contemporary artists are because you seem to have grasped a lot of cool stuff.
Well, honestly, Christian, the way you just summed that up was so great. I just loved hearing you talk about it was just like so loving, but also to the point of like, yeah, I think it's great to open one's mind up. And, you know, I've always been interested in listening to a wide variety of music. Like I said, I came from a musical theater background. So, you know, I was,
Yeah, you got that too, that
yeah,
Broadway theater thing.
I love it, like singing, dancing, performing. And then, you know, I was listening to whether it was Stevie Wonder or the Beatles or, you know, James Taylor. Like I was growing up listening to great songwriters. And, you know, today, honestly, I'm listening to folks from like, I do check out top 40 stuff to see what's going on. Like
Sure.
Cardi B, what's going on with her? Love John Mayer's songwriting. Dua Lipa, like some really
Yeah.
hip stuff happening. Recently have like the Mulan soundtrack on because I'm super excited about that coming out in a week. And like, wow, Disney wrote there's just some really great songs on there. And then, you know, I think there's folks like John Batiste who I'm so
Who you've
pumped
worked
to
with?
work with. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, I've now done some recordings with the cats who are part of Wolfpack. They have another band called the Fearless Flyers, and Nate Smith
Yes,
was on
indeed.
the
Yep.
record with. So I got to record with them for their latest record, and like, I just think it's so cool how they, as a band, like in their live at Madison Square Garden performance, they had like Dave Koz and Chris Thiele come
Uh-huh.
out together, and everyone was like jamming, and it was awesome. And it just, you wouldn't really think that people would kind of, they're all slightly, you know, different musical worlds, but the openness that everyone carries to think about music and I think I love all that. You know, we live in a playlist world. I
Yes.
remember how like, I don't know, a while ago, it seemed to be such a hot panel discussion that everyone is saying, is this jazz? What is jazz? And then it almost seemed like with the way the music business then started to just craft this as just playlists, and
Right.
suddenly rap, country, jazz, like everyone's collaborating with everyone. I just think there's probably a lot of music lovers out there who don't even think about what genre is.
Right.
So I like that. I like thinking about it like that. Like, does this hit me? I remember one time, Christian, I had seen you and your big band, and I think it was at Dizzy's, and you had said, I'm going to butcher this, but something to the extent of, I hope we made you feel something in your heart and not scratch your head. And
Right.
and it was almost like in that moment, you just gave us all an invitation, myself and the audience, to like laugh and sigh and be like, oh, yeah, that is what I'm feeling, and that's okay. And I think sometimes when things get so rigid and so like, is this jazz? It's like people start to worry that they're not feeling the right thing.
Right.
Yeah. So I always love checking out a wide range of stuff, jazz and non-jazz.
I love the fact that you come from the Broadway and theater background, because I tell younger musicians, and frankly, maybe a couple of older musicians, don't really realize that a lot of jazz standards are actually Broadway songs. You know what I mean? So like, there's no context in like how to play the song, because they don't know the storyline or what musical it was from. Once you find that stuff out, there's so much to be learned in the whole Broadway idiom. I remember like I didn't realize like Surrey with the Fringe on Top came from Oklahoma. So many of these songs come from musicals, or like I Have Dream comes from The King and I. And I started thinking, oh man, I need to get my Broadway chops together.
Yeah, and I'm realizing more and more how some of those songs have amazing verses before that I didn't know. And then like the words and the story that goes with that. It's like,
that's right.
Yeah, super fascinating.
What's the song? I think I could be wrong, but it's I Surrender, Dear. You know who the composer is of that song?
No.
You're going to die laughing. Harry Barris.
Oh my God.
Now flip it around.
Oh my God.
So I always think like Barry Harris. This guy's name is Harry Barris.
My gosh. Also, like the timing of you talking about Barry Harris, I just had the honor and pleasure of being part of the Charlie Parker Centennial Celebration with the 90-second wide. They did a live stream, and Barry Harris was on.
That's the cat.
And he was telling stories about Charlie Parker and playing at the piano. It was special. It was Joe Lovano and Antonio Hart was on, and Charles McPherson.
Yes.
Oh, it was a gift.
That's so awesome.
Couple hours of, yeah.
Now let's see. I'm gonna go to the cues here. Let's see who's got some questions.
Oh yes, and before we're done, Kristen, I gotta ask a couple questions too.
Oh yeah, sure. Whatever you want.
But we could sprinkle it in.
Oh yeah, post-genre media just actually asked two questions that you've already addressed. Okay, so here's one. You've posted lots of videos of you lifting saxophones as a workout. Aren't you worried about damaging? That's such a backwards question. You should be asking her about damaging herself, not the instrument.
It's
Jesus
so funny.
Christ.
Okay, so yeah, I've been really into fitness, and I, kind of become super obsessed with it. And so I'm really careful when I lift the Barry. I don't hold the keys or anything. I just hold super solid parts, and I know everybody's sweating when they see it because they think that I'm going to drop or something. I'm like very careful with it. And
I'm more worried about your neck and back.
Yeah.
You can get a new baritone, but you can't get a new neck and back.
That's true. But you know what happened, Christian, is like the start of quarantine, all the gyms closed. So I was like, the Barry, that's a pretty good weight. You pick it up, you do some, bench press. And then I started realizing if I squat and I put a pillow so that the bell doesn't hit anything. If I squat and I play, it works everything,
Right.
Long stuff.
No, that's hilarious.
I was posting it just to see if people wanted to also take part, and it was great. Like a bunch of people were like, "Oh, this is great! I need to do this, and this is solving my problem of not knowing how to work out." So I was like, "Great." That's really
Okay,
fun.
I like so like you bench pressing your baritone. So like check this out. Like I had this bet with well it wasn't a bet, it was a dare. James Brown used to have this famous move where he would throw his microphone stand out and pull it back and spin around before the microphone stand hit the ground.
Hmm.
So I can't believe I'm saying this in public. I had threatened to do that with my bass on stage one night. I was gonna like hold my bass, like at a little angle, and then do a double spin and catch it.
Oh,
So,
yes. Oh my gosh. I don't even know how you would lead up to practicing that. Because you probably have to have really good momentum, right? With like good.
oh yeah, big time. And so like I remember being we were out on the road with Pat Metheny and Billy Higgins, and I looked at Josh one night and I was like, he was like, do it, I dare you, I dare you. I came this close, but good sense took over.
Oh, that's
But
good.
I don't
I
know. One of these
remember.
days, I might have to get like a fiberglass base or something and,
Yeah,
and work it out.
that's cool. Yeah. Um, I remember I got to see, I think, yeah, Victor Wooten. I saw him live at the Rochester Jazz
Oh yeah,
Festival. It was insane. And at
he's
the
got all
end,
kinds of crazy stuff he does.
he did a full,
Yep,
he like played his last note on bass and then
yep,
he hit it and it went all the way
yep,
across his back and he
yep.
caught it. I was like, are you kidding me?
That's crazy.
I mean, my mouth was already on the ground from the solo. And then he just had to end it like that. It was like, wow. I don't even know how you practice that, but
Exactly.
like a step by step.
Oh my gosh, yeah, man. Let me see if we got one more
Oh
question
yeah,
in the
I'm
thing here.
I'm so dying to know.
Ask me anything you want.
Yeah, so one of my favorite recordings one of my favorite jazz standards is Isfahan. I
Mm,
just love that song so much, and I remember falling in love with Joe Henderson and your rendition,
yeah.
and I put it on this afternoon, just and I started singing along to both of your solos because it's so ingrained, like the hits, and then how you end your solo and how you end the song, and he just holds that note. I'm just so curious, like, was it a one take, or did you guys work out the arrangement, or what was the session like? God, I love that
That that
tracking that.
arrangement was actually that arrangement was made by Don Sickler,
Okay.
who produced that record. And yeah, that session was pretty straight up and down. We
Yeah.
had like one rehearsal, and we knew most of the songs already. I mean, we didn't know those particular arrangements, but we knew the tunes. And with that band, with Steven and Hutch and
Oh my
Wynton.
gosh.
But yeah, that was a great session. And I remember the session was it was 3 days. It was a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on that Thursday, Joe had a gig in Philly. So he took me and Hutch down to Philly with him, and we played at the Painted Bride. And yeah, I guess I got nothing but great Joe Henderson stories. But that's where it all started on that. Well,
Right.
actually, no. The first time I played with Joe Henderson was on Stephen Scott's debut Verve album, which was
Okay.
it's called Something to Consider. Yeah, and that was the first time I played with Joe. But
Gosh.
yeah, what a,
I
what a,
love
what a,
that album so
what an
much.
icon, huh?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
Joe Hen.
Okay, and then that's so cool. And then, I had another question that I've been teaching a lot of the next generation, like Gen Zers, specifically a lot of sax players.
Nick, wait, aren't you a Gen Zer?
I'm a millennial.
Are you really?
I'm 28.
I thought millennials started at 30 or
No,
ended at 30. How
I,
does it?
I
Whatever it is.
think it's like 25 to 35, or maybe 20. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah,
all
so
right.
even
Well,
the younger, like the, under 18-year-olds.
oh,
And
okay.
yeah,
Right.
and a lot of saxophone players, like, so pumped to see so many of them just like in it, in their craft. It's a really weird time right now because they don't have their usual band practice. And
Right.
so
Of course.
Leo and I have taught over 700 students over our Zoom group workshops.
Yeah.
And I just had a question for you that I think would be great for all of the students to hear. You know, if you had a piece of advice for what core skills that aspiring young musicians should be developing these days, right? And it could be about the instrument, but also like what else should they be focusing on and developing for skills?
Wow. Well, what's one thing I can think of? Patience is one.
Yeah.
Patience,
That's great.
discipline,
Mm-hmm.
and listening / empathy.
Ooh.
Listening / empathy, patience, and discipline.
Oh, I love that.
Patience, because you're not going to sound you're not going to be like an A-lister overnight. It takes a long time. Discipline, because you got to practice all the time, and listening for obvious reasons. You know, you got to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
It teaches people what your first name is. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of that going on in the world these days. Not a lot of grace.
Yeah.
Somebody
just wrote, the entire world needs an overdose of empathy.
Hello.
Mm-hmm.
For real.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you.
I'm sorry. That was kind of three plus words, but you pick any one of those.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let me one last question, and before we call it a night, Post-genre media asked, historically there has been a significant gender gap in jazz, especially on horns. Do you feel like things are improving?
That's a great question. I mean, when I was first starting saxophone, just to be honest, I didn't have any female sax role models that I was listening to and looking up to. And
you should have went to my middle school.
Yeah.
Remember I told you about all them alto players in the band?
Yeah, that's right. I should have. But then I started when I was learning about jazz, and I started to meet these amazing people. Tia Fuller, you mentioned earlier, brilliant. Candy Dolfer is like a big sister to me. I did a tour opening for her, and Terry Lynn Carrington is like, she had me from 60, and she brought me to she recorded on one of my early albums, and then she had me play with her band. She brought me all the way to Uruguay, and then I recorded on one of her Mosaic albums, and she's an incredible mentor, teacher.
Yes, she is.
Artist, musician. And I'm really encouraged to see more and more young ladies, when I've done workshops in the past or gone to different middle schools, high schools, colleges, I'm seeing more and more girls in the saxophone chair, in the brass chair. And I remember there was one school actually that there were more girls. There was like one guy in the sax section that was all ladies, and including lady on the baritone. It was like a middle school. And I mean, that's awesome. And it really means a lot to me when I get messages from other young girls that say, I'm really looking up to you and what you're doing. And I had a girl the other day say she's Asian American as well and playing sax. And she was just saying it's been really inspiring for her to look at what I've been doing. And I think she's also been having fun dancing and expressing herself. And she's like, I guess the kids in her band program were kind of teasing her a little bit. And she's like, but I looked at you and you're doing your thing and I want to do that. And so that means a lot to me. And I take it very seriously, like that, being out there doing the thing and hoping that other young girls are like, yeah, pick up the sax. This is awesome.
Right.
So I think if we're moving in the right direction, of course, it's like going to take time.
Yeah.
But I'm very encouraged to see more and more. Yeah.
Well, thanks to people like yourself, Grace. And I also want to dap you because I got very excited when I saw you on Good Day New York.
Oh, yes.
And I was, because, Rosanna Scotto is like a fixture here in the New York area. She's been on the air here for so long. So when I found out you were going to be on there, I was just like, there's my buddy.
Oh, that was fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So, hey, Grace, thank you for joining me this evening. And you're a wonderful musician and a wonderful person. And it's been a long time since I've seen you in the flesh, but hopefully this pandemic will end sooner than later, and we can remedy that.
I hope so. Christian, it's been such a pleasure. I just want to point out, and this is like, I got the limited edition Newport Jazz Fest poster from when we played, when you and the team had me and my band play in 2018. And
Yeah.
I look at it every day. It's not just there because of the stream. It's like, it's always
Oh,
there. It's my inspiration. And thank you for having us. That year there was torrential rainstorm. It was
yeah.
so
That
much
was
fun.
deep.
And the programming was awesome. I just
Oh,
loved
thank you.
every show. And it's such a pleasure to be on with you. And yeah, I hope we can all be out there seeing each other in the flesh
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Me too. Well, listen, you take care of yourself, okay?
Yes,
And
thank you.
stay in touch. Say hello to your folks.
I will.
And to all of our viewers, I will see you here again next Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. And my guest will be Lettucey. So make sure you tune in. And until then, y'all be cool. Grace Kelly, you the bomb.
Oh, thank you, Christian. So much
All
fun.
right,
Thanks for
darling.
having me.
I'll see
Bye.
y'all later. Bye.